Well, welcome to the third edition of the video analysis of Wilfed Owen's poetry, the core text set down for the Year 9 unit representations of war. Now this poem, the Send-Off, is similar in some ways to the first poem that we did, Dulce et Decorum Est, in that it's a descriptive poem of an event. But it's quite different in that the event in this poem doesn't occur at the front, doesn't occur at the war, it occurs back in England. And it's an event that would have happened hundreds and hundreds of times during the war, which was set in an English village, and near the village a training camp had been set up, and young men would come at various times and be trained and then march into town and jump on a train and head off to parts unknown, and then ultimately to France or Belgium and to the Western Front, where many of them would actually die. So Owen has picked one such event, and he's describing it and he's commenting on it as well as we go. So let's get started. Now, first of all, the title, the send-off, is important because Owen is looking at this event not necessarily from the point of view of the soldiers themselves, but he's from the point of view of the people sending these soldiers off. Days waving goodbye or giving them flowers and wishing them well, and really this is a poem about the hypocrisy going on back in England, and the fact that people are not standing up and speaking just about how terrible it is to send trainloads upon trainloads of young men off to their almost certain deaths. That people know this and no one's willing to talk about it. So this is what the poem's about. Alright, so let's get started now. I'll just get my highlighter going here. And let's do the first sentence. Down the close darkening lanes they sang their way to the siding shed and lined the train with faces grimly gay. So he starts off with these young men marching down the road all the way to the train, jumping on the train, and he's commenting on their faces, and he uses what we call an oxymoron, or a contradiction in terms, and that is the term grimly gay. Now the term gay, of course, has more connotations these days, but essentially in those days it was pretty much had one, which was that you were full of fun and having a laugh, and you were pretty happy. But the other word, grimly, suggests a steely determination and a sense of resignation to your fate. And the two words don't really match up, but that's the thing about oxymoron. You put two opposite or two words that don't really match together, and you get a meaning out of it. So these guys, they know their fate pretty much. They know that they've got a good chance of not making it, but they accept that and they're making the best of it. Alright, their breasts were stuck all white with wreath and spray, as men's are dead. So the people in the town were putting white flowers on them, throwing streamers or rice or anything that you would throw at a celebration. But there's an irony here in that the way that the townspeople were putting flowers or streamers on them would suggest also is a reference also to what they'd probably do when these guys are dead at a funeral. So there's somewhat of a double meaning here in what these people are doing. They may well be celebrating the end of their training, but they're probably also giving them an impromptu funeral. Alright. So quite a bit of double meaning going on in terms of the symbols used with flowers and spray, or things that you throw in a celebration. Alright. Let's move on. Now this word here, or the start of this stanza, the second one, is up for interpretation, but we'll read it and we'll comment on it. Dull porters watched them, and a casual tramp stood staring hard, sorry to miss them from the upland camp. Now the term dull, in reference to porters, the porters are the guys that carry bags and get people onto the trains. So these guys are either dull because they're stupid, or they're dull because they're showing no emotion, whatever emotion they are feeling towards these young men being sent off to their death. They're keeping within themselves. So it's just business as usual for them. And a casual tramp who obviously, may well have made some money out of these guys when they were stationed up in the camp, and they're sorry to see them go because they added a bit of life to the town, certainly brought some money in, and they're going to have to wait for the next group of young men to turn up. And maybe they actually got to know them and actually quite like them, but here they are sending them off and no one's saying anything. Then unmoved, signals nodded and a lamp winked to the guard. Now, Owen brings in two examples of personification here. Then unmoved, signals nodded and a lamp winked to the guard. So there's a suggestion here that there's some sort of conspiracy going on, that everybody, apart from these young men being sent off to war, knows about it. Everyone knows they're going to this war, that they're going to die, and they sort of winked and nodded and quietly hushed them, sent them off on their way in a hushed sort of tone, and no one wanted to talk too much about it. But yet they know what's happening, and they know that not many of these guys will come home. It's the first sense that we get that there's a conspiracy going on here, that everybody's in on it. And Owen's accusing the local people of such a conspiracy. And he continues, so secretly, like wrongs hushed up, they went. So secretly, like wrongs hushed up, they went. One line sentence there. And this is where he directly accuses them of not speaking openly about something that's quite momentous. A whole trainload of men being sent off to their death. No one wants to talk about it. It's too shameful. And then Owen, for 2 lines only, jumps from third person into second person, and he actually speaks like one of the townspeople, sending these young guys off with a rationalisation. They're rationalising their decision to make themselves feel better. So here he is as one of these townspeople. They were not ours. We never heard to which front these were sent. And notice they and these, those 2 terms there, they're pronouns. They don't give these young men names. They and these. They don't recognise them as individuals. And they just said, well, these were not our people. They were sent off to the war. We never knew where they went, and anyway, it's not really our business. And that really is a sense of lacking responsibility to fellow humanity, isn't it? Where you think, well, it doesn't matter if they're not yours or not. These are young men who are destined to die, and no one wants to warn them, or no one wants to complain about it and suggest that what's happening here is plainly wrong. We end the stanza and we move on and jump back into third person. So it's only 2 lines that changes the person here. Nor there, if they yet mock what women meant who gave them flowers. Now, here he jumps into the point of view of the soldiers, and he suggests that he wonders whether when they got to the front and saw what it was, and saw how atrocious it was and how dangerous it was, whether they laugh about the fact that when women were giving them flowers and sending them off, whether they actually meant as a funeral goodbye rather than as a celebration, and that he thinks that there is some sort of a bit of irony here in the way they would view that if they ever did think of it again. And then he finishes this little stanza with a question that he answers in the last stanza. Shall they return to beatings of great bells in wild trainloads? So the way they've been sent off, will that be repeated when they come home? And he answers, it's not a rhetorical question because he answers it himself with a cluster of 3. A few, too few for drums and yells. So in other words, not many. Most of them will die. And there's a comma there, so that's we continue on, and this whole final stanza here is a sentence. A few, too few for drums and yells, may creep back silent to still village wells up half-known roads. Now this stanza is a very dense stanza. There's lots of meaning here, and the words he chooses by themselves really matter. So you've got that cluster of three. We'll just get rid of that. Got that cluster of three there. Right. And there's a reference to the whole party thing, drums and yells. But the word may. So there's a suggestion that none of them will come back. And he's not talking about this village. He's talking about any village. That will they go home to their villages? They may creep back. Now, to still village wells up half-known roads. Now, I've left this bit here because I'll come back to it. The fact that still village wells up half-known roads is a reference to the fact that because so many young men have been sent to their deaths, some of these villages have died. You know, so few people are left in these villages that village wells don't really get disturbed that much, and that the men who went, they've had such a horrific experience that when they return, the roads that they go along, to them are half known. Their lives have been so irrevocably changed that this notion of this happy homecoming is difficult for them. But I want to bring you to these words here because I think they're very powerful. Creep back silent too. So why would they creep back, and why would they be silent? Well, I think it's a reference to the fact that so many of them die. The ones that do come back are ashamed that they're still alive. They have what they call, it's a reference to what they call survivor guilt, that if you actually make it back, you actually feel really guilty, and that all the people in the town that you live with look at you as though, why are you alive when my son or my husband or my boyfriend, my fiance didn't survive? How come you get to live and he didn't? And then many of the soldiers had difficulty dealing with that when they came back. And the term survivor guilt is a real thing, a recognised condition of trauma for returned soldiers, and many World War I guys had it. And so we're left with this final stanza of real damage done to societies and individuals, even if they do survive the war. And we look back at the whole poem and we think, well, Owen really is accusing people living in villages and towns all over the place of hypocrisy. And he's bitterly telling them that, look, what they're condoning here is not only destroying the lives of individuals, but it's destroying communities as well. Communities get emptied, communities get destroyed, and even if some of these young men survive and come back, there's a real bitterness and division that exists in these communities, towns and villages post-war. Many scars that need to be healed. And he asked the question, why isn't anyone saying anything? Why are you being complicit in this destruction of society? It's not just destruction on the front, it's destruction at home as well. It's another very powerful poem, and I hope this video helps in terms of the analysis and answering of questions. Good luck.